Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Wednesday, the 19th day of March, 2025. And again, it's very important that you and I understand exactly what's going on in the world and how it specifically fits the biblical scenario of the last days. That is, before the return of Jesus Christ and the many events that the Bible predicts that will precede it. This is what we do here on Breaking News. We're only interested in stories that have something to do with what the scripture says about our world and what it's going to look like at the time of the end. And so that's what we concentrate on. After the military strikes by the U.S. on Yemen and the Houthis and the renewal of the fighting in Gaza, Iran in the Middle East now finds itself in an entirely new, different situation. As we elaborated yesterday, and it was very important what we said in that little brief breaking news. Israel, along with the help of the U.S., is neutralizing the military power of Iran's major surrogates, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. From Scripture, we know that Iran and its proxies will not play a huge part in last days Bible prophecy. The key characters are Israel, Russia, Iran, and Turkey with respect to the Ezekiel 38-39 scenario, and Europe will also rise as a major power with an eventual 10-nation union forming. China and the United States are not relevant as far as the Bible is concerned, neither are mentioned in Scripture. So, therefore, when we daily examine these headlines, it's important that we always look at them through the lens of Scripture so that we know precisely where these nations will eventually end up as far as the Bible is concerned. And amazingly, what do we see day after day? We see events taking place where everything is moving in that direction. Let us not miss, please, let us not miss this miraculous fulfillment of what the scripture predicted long ago. And as always, today's headlines confirm this. The U.S. says Hamas is solely to blame for the resumption of the Gaza hostilities. Israel had the right to renew its military action. That's so true. Israeli Defense Minister Katz said the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force strikes will continue until the hostages are freed and the southern threats, that is from Gaza, are removed. In other words, no military threat from Gaza any longer. Netanyahu then said last night in a broadcast to the people of Israel, from now on, negotiations will only take place under fire. We won't stop fighting to do any further negotiations. We will negotiate, but we will keep fighting. Now, attacks in Gaza and Yemen have left Iran in confusion over its next moves because all its surrogates seem to be getting neutralized. And finally, the great story yesterday, also Trump and Putin agreed to immediate Ukraine peace talks and improve relations. These headlines all fit with what we've expected to see from our study of Scripture. So let's look at them. Headline number one, the U.S. says Hamas is solely to blame for the resumption of the Gaza hostilities. The U.S. blames Hamas for breaking the ceasefire in Gaza. It backs Israel's response and condemns Hamas's use of civilian sites, says acting U.S. envoy. And the use of civilian sites is what they always do. They fire from civilian sites, such as mosques, hospitals, churches, kindergartens, whatever it might be. And so it'd be tough for Israel to respond. Okay, responsibility for the resumption of hostilities in Gaza lies solely with Hamas, and the United States supports Israel in its next steps. The acting U.S. ambassador to the United Nations said yesterday. Ambassador Dorothy Shea made the statement to a UN Security Council briefing after Palestinian health authorities said Israeli strikes pounded Gaza and killed more than 400 people, ending weeks of relative calm after talks to secure a permanent ceasefire stalled. We support Israel in its next steps, she said, while rejecting the allegations that the IDF were conducting indiscriminate attacks. They never do that sort of thing. Now, it's too bad most other countries won't admit the obvious here. Indeed, the entire fiasco is 100% the fault of Hamas. Israel must neutralize the military threat of Hamas for their own security, and that's what they're in the process of doing. Headline number two, we go further into this. Israeli Defense Minister Katz says the IDF strikes will continue until the hostages are freed and the southern threats are removed. Southern threats, that being Gaza. He mentioned yesterday they basically moved the yardstick for the end of the IDF's renewal of hostilities against Hamas and for a new deal to become dependent, get this, on the return of all the hostages and a removal of the threat to Israel's Gaza corridor residents. In other words, two things we're looking forward to do: get all our hostages back and remove any threat that the people that live in the southern part of Israel near Gaza will have any worry about being attacked by Hamas in the future. Until now, Israel said it was steady to extend the ceasefire for approximately another 50 days in exchange for 11 live hostages. We've been reporting this, plus some deceased ones. And the U.S. had offered a ceasefire extension in return for 5 live hostages, plus some deceased ones. But Hamas had dropped its demand for a complete IDF withdrawal before it released any more hostages, but was only offering to release 1 live hostage and 4 deceased hostages, all of whom have joint Israeli American citizenship. And Israel and the U.S., of course, rejected that. If Israel sticks to Katz's benchmarks, then all of these interim deals are off the table now. And this is the real key takeaway from this. They would force an endgame with Hamas either returning all of the hostages for a limited time ceasefire with no guarantee that the IDF would not renew hostilities, or if Hamas agreeing to receive immunity if its leaders agreed to expulsion from Gaza. In other words, you people that are left, the leaders that are left, will grant you immunity, but you have to leave Gaza and never come back. And of course, the military threat will be neutralized then. So that's what their options will be. In recent days and weeks, there have been increased evidence, and this is another interesting, I think we mentioned this briefly just in passing. There was really actually increased evidence that Hamas had reestablished its 25,000 fighter military structure, even if using many minors, and was rebuilding its military defensive positions and was considering, here's the key, to penetrate Israel's border again, even if in a limited fashion. In other words, there were signs that they're actually thinking of coming back and doing another tax, or like the October 7th one. And as we mentioned the other day, the strange thing about this, the incredible thing, the average age of these 25,000 fighters is 16. 16. That's the average age. And so you're talking about just young, you know, children in many senses that are basically now Hamas fighting. Now, Kotz mentioned the threat earlier this week to some southern residents. In other words, they told the people living in the south near the border, beware, Hamas may try another incursion during this time of peace. Now, this worrisome fact is another reason why Israel must continue the fight until the weaponry of Hamas has been neutralized. It will not be easy, but it is necessary. Also, as we have mentioned in our programs, there is the biblical assumption that Hamas will not be a major problem in the future, since Israel will be existing in relative security when the predicted Russian-led invasion occurs, according to Ezekiel 38 and 39. All right, headline number 3. Here's Netanyahu now. He's going to confirm all this. From now on, negotiations will only take place under fire. Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the nation from Kiryat in Tel Aviv last evening, Tuesday, following the surprise airstrikes launched by the Israeli Air Force against Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorist organizations in the Gaza Strip early the previous morning. We return to fighting with strength on the recommendation of our security officials, Netanyahu stressed. Now, here's the key takeaway. This is just the beginning. We will continue to fight to achieve our goals of the war and the promise that Gaza will not pose a threat to Israel. From now on, negotiations will only take place under fire. We extended the ceasefire in the weeks in which we did not receive any hostages. We sent delegations to Doha. We accepted the proposal of the U.S. envoy Witkoff. But on the other hand, Hamas rejected every proposal. I accepted the recommendation of the Israeli Defense Force and the security establishment to return to fighting, he added. And this was certainly the right move. Now the ball is in the court of Hamas. We'll see what they do. Now, this move, again, has caused problems with Iran because, as we see, it causes confusion. Our next headline is from the Jerusalem Post. Attacks in Gaza and Yemen leave Iran in confusion over its next moves. I would say so. If Tehran is not careful, it will wake up to find all its proxies have had their wings clipped. Then they become a liability instead of an asset. And that's what we emphasized yesterday. Again, we're talking about the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Hamas there in Gaza. All of them are getting their wings clipped, and they're really going to be a liability for Iran in the future instead of an asset. After 4 days, the article says that the U.S. attacking the Houthis and 1 day of Israel striking Hamas in Gaza, Iran is now in confusion and doesn't know how to respond. Tehran is concerned that the U.S. strikes could escalate, while Iran is not ready for a major confrontation. They certainly are. Like we said, their air defense system is basically non-existent, was taken down months ago by the Israeli attack. So Israel could and the U.S. together could go into Iranian territory and basically do what they want to do and neutralize the program there. their nuclear program. So basically, on the one hand, Iran's supreme leaders told the country not to trust any opening from the Trump administration, but this leaves Tehran in a bind. On Monday, Iranian Foreign Minister Agrachi hosted Russian Deputy Minister Alexander Grushko in a meeting in Tehran. They called for the expansion of bilateral relations and helping to ensure regional peace and stability. And again, the relations between Iran and Russia have been consistent, ongoing, and are getting stronger. And this is exactly what we expect because Iran will be part of this last day's invasion led by Russia. They also discussed, these two leaders, the recent meetings in China, which Russia, Chinese, and Iranian delegations participated. They were discussing nuclear issues and other issues in China aimed at securing common interest in protecting the rule of law at the international level. What a joke that is. They're doing anything but protecting the rule of law, all three of these nations. Iranian state media reported Iran wants China and Russia's support. Meanwhile, Agrachi also denounced the U.S. and U.K. military aggression against Yemen, as well as the ongoing Israeli atrocities faced by the Palestinians. The atrocities are on the side of Hamas, the fault of Hamas. He condemned the strikes during a Monday event with foreign ambassadors and called on Muslim countries to do more during Ramadan. Well, they're not rising to the occasion. This is the problem Iran found in the beginning. When October 7th, 2023 happened, they were expecting all these other nations in the Middle East to join them to destroy Israel. They expected Hezbollah to immediately attack from Lebanon, which they did not, which was fortunate for Israel because they couldn't have handled that at the outset. And so now they're calling on nations to help them. They're getting a big zero from the other nations in the Middle East. All right, bottom line is Iran realizes that its days are numbered with Israel and the U.S. neutralizing their subordinates. In other words, Iran is the military factor, as the military leader in the Middle East against Israel, will be a thing of the past. They'll be there, as we're going to mention in this next article. They're going to be there to still try and harass Israel, but they won't have the power, the authority that they have had in the past. And this is the key, the next headline. Number 5, Trump and Putin agree to immediate Ukraine peace talks and improve relations. This is from UPI. Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin engaged in a roughly 90-minute phone call late Tuesday morning that might end to leading the war in Ukraine. The two world leaders agreed on the need for immediate peace talks that are to be held in the Middle East, of all places, as well as the basic structure for ceasefire agreements that eventually would become a permanent end to the war. Today, President Trump and President Putin spoke about the need for peace and a ceasefire in the Ukraine war, the White House Office of Communications readout says. Both leaders agreed this conflict needs to end with lasting peace, the readout adds. The blood and treasure that both Ukraine and Russia have been spending in this war would be better spent on the needs of the people. Trump and Putin agreed the movement to peace will begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, as well as technical negotiations of the implementation of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. These ceasefires could, and this proper word here, could lead to a full ceasefire and permanent peace, according to the White House. The readout says the conflict should not have happened and should have ended long ago. Sincere and good faith peace efforts are now being made. All right. After the call, the Russian special envoy suggested a historic agreement had been reached that will make the world a, quote, safer place, close quote. Under the leadership of President Putin and President Trump, the world has become a much safer place today, Dmitriev said, posting on X, formerly Twitter. Historic, epic, he added. Now, what's interesting here, too, Trump and Putin also discussed matters in the Middle East and agreed that Iran never should be in a position to destroy Israel, according to the White House readout. In other words, even Putin agrees Iran should not be in the position to have nuclear weapons to destroy Israel. Their discussion on the Middle East included the need to stop the proliferation of strategic weapons and to engage to ensure the broadest possible application while improving relations between the U.S. and Russia. They agreed that a future with an improved bilateral relationship between the U.S. and Russia had a huge upside. This includes economic deals, geopolitical stability, when peace has been achieved. All right. This story, which rounds out the headlines, is what is necessary for the last day scenario to be set. Russia must be free from any wars elsewhere so it can eventually invade Israel. Iran will still be an enemy of Israel, but will not be the military threat that it now is, with its proxies no longer relevant. As we've also been reporting, Turkey will be front and center in its desire to be a major influence in the region. And based upon scripture alone, we have been predicting a scenario like this for years. It's now taking place. Things are indeed moving forward toward the end, as the Bible has long ago predicted. We're going to talk about this on our second edition of Breaking News today, with further explanation of the other players that'll be involved in the Ezekiel 38-39 scenario, including Libya and the Sudan, and how this is taking shape also. Amazingly, all it's fitting into place. So, for a thorough understanding of what's going to take place, please see our books, our 12 books on Bible prophecy from our website, Educating Our World, give you a comprehensive explanation of what the scripture says is going to take place. They're all free. They're free downloads under the heading of Bible prophecy. So each day we marvel how precise the Bible is when it predicts the future. Let us never, ever miss this wonderful, wonderful truth. The Bible is absolutely perfectly correct on what the world's going to be like in the last days, as we see every single day. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later today on a second edition of Breaking News. Until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.